The champagne was still cold. That's the detail I keep coming back to. Not the dress, not the flowers, not the 4-tier cake that cost $1,200 and tasted like vanilla and bad decisions. The champagne. 2 glasses, poured by the hotel attendant at exactly 10:15 p.m. when Tyler and I checked into room 1407 at the Atlanta Marriott Marquis. The bottle was a Veuve Clicquot, $180, wrapped in a white towel with a handwritten card that said, "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Hargrove." By midnight, one glass was still full. The other had a single lipstick print on the rim, mine. From the sip I took while waiting for my husband to come back from getting something from the car. He never came back. At 12:03 a.m., my phone lit up on the nightstand. Not a call. Text. 14 words. "I'm sorry, Maya. Can't do this. Please don't hate me." I read it 3 times. I set the phone face down on the bed. I walked to the window and looked out over Peachtree Street, still in my dress. Vera Wang Ivory $3,400, altered twice, and I watched the city move like nothing had happened. A couple arguing under a streetlight. A food delivery cyclist cutting through a red. I didn't scream. I didn't call him back. I didn't call my mother. I sat down on the edge of the bed, poured the second glass of champagne, and I got very, very quiet. Because here's what most people don't understand about me. Quiet is not the same as broken. Quiet is where I go when I'm thinking. And on the night of October 14th, sitting alone in a honeymoon suite my new husband had just evacuated, I started thinking harder than I ever had in my life. What I figured out in the next 27 hours changed everything. And Tyler. He had absolutely no idea what was coming. My name is Maya Chin Williams. I'm 31 years old. I'm a certified financial planner at a mid-size wealth management firm in Buckhead, the kind of office with glass walls and leather chairs and clients who call you by your first name because they trust you with their retirement, their children's college funds, their inheritance disputes, and sometimes, quietly, their marriages. I say that not to impress you. I say it because it matters to understanding how spectacularly I had managed to blind myself to risk in my own personal life while spending every professional hour of my week identifying it in other people's. I met Tyler Hargrove at 27, at a rooftop birthday party in Midtown for a mutual friend. He was funny. He was attentive. He had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room, which I would later understand was a skill, not a personality trait. He ran a small logistics company. 3 vans, 2 employees, a lease on a warehouse unit out in Gwinnett County. It wasn't empire building, but he was building. I respected that. We dated for 4 years. I paid my half of everything. Dinners, trips, the weekend we spent in Savannah for my 29th birthday where he proposed on the dock behind our rental cottage at 7 a.m. while I was still in pajamas and completely unprepared. I said yes immediately. The wedding planning took 14 months. My parents contributed $18,000. His parents contributed $9,000. I pulled $22,000 from my own savings. Money I had earmarked for a down payment on a property I'd been watching in Decatur. I chose the wedding instead. That's the part one sit with sometimes. Not the betrayal. Choice. I made a deliberate financial decision to invest in this marriage before it had even started. I moved money from a column labeled future into a column labeled us. And I did it with my eyes open, my spreadsheets clean, my projections reviewed. I was not a naive woman who got swept away. I was a financially literate, professionally credentialed adult who loved someone deeply enough to believe the risk was worth taking. And that clarity, is what made October 14th feel like falling through a floor I'd personally inspected. Tyler was 33. Charming. Moderately ambitious. And as I would confirm at approximately 12:08 a.m. when I recognized the patterned carpet in a hotel hallway posted to Instagram stories. 2 floors below me, in a room booked under a name I recognized, not nearly as committed to me as I had been to him. Her name was Kayla Simmons. And this wasn't the first time I'd heard it. Here's the thing about red flags. They don't arrive waving. They arrive looking almost exactly like nothing. A text message you weren't meant to see. A name mentioned once at a dinner table. A hotel keycard that falls out of a jacket pocket on a Tuesday night in April and lands on your kitchen floor while you're standing there in socks holding a glass of water. That keycard was from a Hyatt in Perimeter. Tyler said it was from a client meeting. He said it so quickly and so easily that I almost believed him. I picked it up, turned it over, handed it back, and filed it somewhere in the back of my mind under investigate later. Because I was not the kind of woman who made accusations without evidence. I was the kind of woman who waited until she had a complete picture. The picture took another 8 months to develop fully. Kayla Simmons came into focus slowly. First as an unknown number. 3 missed calls to Tyler's phone the night before our rehearsal dinner, a Thursday in early October. I wasn't snooping. His phone was on the kitchen counter, face up, and the calls came in while he was in the shower. I saw the number. I didn't recognize it. I took a photo of his screen with my phone. I know how that sounds. But I want you to understand, I wasn't paranoid. I was a financial planner. I had spent 9 years being paid to notice small discrepancies before they became large disasters. Noticing was not a character flaw. It was my entire professional value. I ran the number 2 days later. Came back to a social media profile. Kayla Simmons, 28, event coordinator, based in Sandy Springs. Pretty. Socially active. And in 4 photos. Buried deep in her public Instagram from 2021 and 2022. Standing close enough to Tyler at various events that the proximity was unmistakable. I didn't confront him. Not then. The second moment came at Christmas dinner at his parents' house in Marietta. His mother, Diane, a woman who had never fully warmed to me despite 4 years of birthday cards, holiday gifts, and showing up to every family function with a dish I'd spent 2 hours preparing, made a comment that I've replayed probably 200 times since. We were talking about the wedding, about the venue, about how everything was coming together, and Diane looked at Tyler across the table with this particular smile. Private, almost conspiratorial, and said, "Tyler always had options. We're just glad he finally settled." The table laughed. I laughed. Tyler looked briefly at the ceiling. Settled. The word landed in my chest like a stone dropping into still water. Nobody acknowledged it. We moved on to dessert. But I excused myself to the bathroom, sat on the edge of the tub for 4 minutes, and made a decision. I would not go into this marriage without documentation. Over the following 3 months, from January to March, I quietly assembled a personal file. Screenshots of the unknown number. A printed copy of Kayla's public social media. Notes with dates, times, and behaviors. A log of the 2 occasions Tyler came home later than expected with explanations that were slightly too detailed to be spontaneous. I kept the file in a folder on my work laptop under a project name that would mean nothing to anyone else. I didn't do this because I planned to leave. I did it because I was a woman who understood that information has value, and that the worst time to start collecting it is after you need it. I walked down the aisle on October 14th loving Tyler Hargrove. Genuinely, completely, and without performance. I also walked down that aisle with a folder that had 17 pages in it. What they didn't know, what Tyler didn't know, what Kayla didn't know, what his mother sitting in the 3rd row with her corsage and her careful smile didn't know, was that the woman they had all, in their various ways, underestimated had already been thinking 3 moves ahead. The champagne was still cold. And I was just getting started. The ceremony itself was beautiful. I want to say that clearly because it matters to the story, not because I'm being generous, but because the contrast is important. When something beautiful is used as a backdrop for betrayal, the beauty doesn't soften it, sharpens it. The venue was Serenity Gardens in Roswell. String lights across a white tent. 114 guests. My cousin Marcus walked me down the aisle because my father had passed 3 years prior, and he held my arm with both hands the entire walk, like he was trying to transfer something steady into me through his grip. Tyler was waiting at the altar in a charcoal suit I had helped him select. He looked at me the way you hope someone looks at you on your wedding day, like the room had narrowed to just your face. He cried during my vows. Real tears. I watched them fall and I thought, this is it. This is the right choice. All of it was worth this. We were pronounced married at 5:47 p.m. By 7:30 p.m. we were at the reception, and by 9:15 p.m. I noticed Tyler had stepped away from the table for the third time in 40 minutes. Each time he came back he was on his phone, screen angled away, explanation already loaded before I could ask. Logistics issue with the warehouse. Just checking in with Marcus about the van. Nothing babe, I'm right here. At 10 p.m. we said our goodbyes, changed out of our formal wear in the bridal suite, and rode to the Marriott in a hired car that smelled like leather and gardenias. Tyler held my hand the whole ride. His thumb was moving, restless, across my knuckles. Noticed. I didn't say anything. We checked in. The attendant poured the champagne. Tyler said he'd left something in the car. His overnight bag, he thought, maybe the charger he'd packed separately. He kissed me on the cheek. He walked out. I sat on the bed. Waited. At 11:20 p.m. I texted him. Everything okay? 3 dots appeared. Then disappeared. Then appeared again. His response came at 11:34 p.m. Almost back. 2 minutes. At 12:03 a.m., the 14-word text arrived. I've already told you what it said. What I haven't told you is what came 17 minutes later, while I was still sitting at the window with my champagne. My phone buzzed again. Not Tyler this time. A notification. Instagram. A tagged story from a guest account I didn't follow, but the algorithm surfaced it because 3 of my contacts had viewed it. Champagne glass emoji. No caption. And behind it, a hotel corridor, shot in that slightly overexposed way phones capture fluorescent lighting, with a distinctive burgundy and gold carpet pattern running the length of the frame. I knew that carpet. I had walked on it 4 hours earlier when we checked in. I opened the profile. Kayla Simmons. Last active. 2 minutes ago. I set my phone down on the nightstand face up this time. I looked at the ceiling. And I said out loud to no one, in a room that cost $340 a night and smelled like eucalyptus and fresh linen. Okay. Okay then. I didn't cry. Not yet. The tears came later, around 2 a.m., briefly and privately, and then I made a deliberate decision to stop. Not because I wasn't devastated. I was. But I understood something fundamental in that moment that I think people in pain often miss. Grief is a process you can schedule. Strategy has a deadline. I had 14 missed calls from my mother by morning. I answered none of them. At 6:47 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It took me a moment to understand what I was reading. It was from Kayla. I just want you to know I didn't plan this. He came to me. I told him this morning it's done. I'm not built for this kind of mess. I'm sorry. I read it twice. I saved the screenshot. I added it to the folder. And then I picked up my phone and called my attorney. My attorney's name is Renee Okafor. She's been my personal attorney for 6 years. I found her when I needed help reviewing the partnership agreement at my firm, and I kept her because she's exactly the kind of person you want on your side when things stop being theoretical. I called her at 7:02 a.m. on October 15th. She answered on the second ring. I told her what happened in 3 sentences. She said, "Are you somewhere safe?" Said yes. She said, "Don't touch anything jointly held until we talk. I'll be at your location by 9. She arrived at 9:11 a.m. with coffee, a yellow legal pad, and the specific expression of a woman who has seen this before and knows exactly what to do about it. We sat at the small table by the window, room 1407, champagne bottle still on the dresser, and I walked her through everything. The folder, the screenshots, the key card, the Christmas dinner comment, Kayla's text, the Instagram story, and then I walked her through the paperwork. Because here is what Tyler, in his haste and his romanticism and his catastrophically poor judgment, had failed to consider. I was a financial planner. I had reviewed every document connected to our joint life with the same rigor I applied to client portfolios. I knew our paperwork the way a surgeon knows anatomy. First, Tyler's business loan. In February, 8 months before the wedding, Tyler had needed $38,000 to refinance the warehouse lease and purchase 2 additional delivery vans. His credit profile alone wasn't sufficient for the terms he wanted. He asked me to co-sign. I agreed because we were getting married, because I believed in the business, and because the loan agreement contained a clause I had specifically negotiated. In the event of marital dissolution within the first 12 months, the co-signing party retained the right to petition for liability reassignment, contingent on documented evidence of unilateral contract abandonment. It was dense legal language. Tyler's eyes had glazed over it when we signed. Mine had not. Second, our marriage certificate had been filed with Fulton County at 4:12 p.m. on October 14th, before the reception, before the champagne, before the 14-word text. We were legally married, which meant that every financial instrument Tyler held that had been opened, modified, or restructured after that timestamp was subject to marital asset consideration under Georgia law. Third, and this is the one that made Renee set down her coffee cup and look at me with something close to admiration, Tyler had never updated his beneficiary designations. There were 2 accounts, a Roth IRA opened in 2019 and a whole life insurance policy his parents had transferred to him at 25, that still listed his previous long-term girlfriend as beneficiary. He had mentioned updating them twice in the past year. He had not done it, which meant that as his legal spouse, I had standing to contest those designations under Georgia's spousal rights provisions. I wasn't after his retirement account. I want to be clear about that. I didn't want his money. I wanted my money, the $22,000 I had pulled from my own savings to fund a wedding that had lasted, functionally, about 6 hours. And I wanted the co-signing liability removed from my credit profile before Tyler's business, which I had just decided I no longer had any personal interest in protecting, made any decisions that could damage it. Renee looked at her legal pad. She had filled 2 pages. She said, "Maya, you have more leverage in this situation than most people have after a decade of marriage." I said, "I know. I just needed to hear it from you." That was the moment everything shifted. Here is what I did not do. I did not post anything on social media. I did not call Tyler's mother. I did not text Kayla back. I did not call any of the 114 people who had watched me get married the previous evening and were, by that morning, almost certainly aware that something had gone wrong. Silence, when deployed correctly, is not passive. It is a pressure system. And I had decided to build pressure. Renee left room 1407 at 11:30 a.m. with a clear action plan and my signed authorization to begin filing. I checked out of the hotel at noon. I was not going to spend a second night in that room, and drove myself back to the house Tyler and I had shared for 14 months in Brookhaven. The house was in my name. That had been a point of quiet negotiation 18 months earlier when we'd moved in together. Tyler had wanted to go on the lease jointly. I had suggested we put it in my name given that my credit score was 796, and his was recovering from a collections issue in 2020. He'd agreed. He'd probably forgotten. I walked in, made coffee, opened my laptop, and began working through a checklist I had started constructing mentally at approximately 2 a.m. the night before. Step 1. I called the loan servicer for the $38,000 business loan at 1:15 p.m. and formally notified them of my intent to petition for liability reassignment. They noted the request and opened a case file. The representative told me processing could take 30 to 45 business days, but that my co-signing obligations were technically in a protected review status pending the outcome. I asked for that in writing. It arrived in my email by 3 p.m. Step 2. At 2:30 p.m. I contacted my bank and separated my personal accounts, premarital assets clearly documented, into a protected individual account structure that Renee had recommended. I was not hiding money. I was protecting money that had always been mine. There is a legal and moral distinction, and I stayed firmly on the right side of it. Step 3. I compiled the complete documentation file. Every screenshot, every date stamp note, the photo of the hotel keycard, the Instagram story, Kayla's text message, and sent an encrypted copy to Renee and a second copy to a secure cloud folder only I could access. 17 pages became 23. Step 4. At 4:45 p.m., Renee filed the initial divorce petition with Fulton County Superior Court. Georgia is a no-fault divorce state, but no fault doesn't mean no evidence. Evidence shapes the financial settlement. Evidence is the difference between walking away clean and walking away having funded someone else's mistakes. At 5:30 p.m. I finally called my mother back. She answered crying. I told her I was fine. She said, "How are you fine, Maya? How are you calm right now?" And I said, "Mom, I'm not calm. I'm focused. There's a difference." She cried harder. Let her. I ordered dinner at 7 p.m., jerk chicken from the spot on Dresden that Tyler never liked, and ate it at my kitchen counter while reviewing the divorce petition documents Renee had sent for my records. I made notes in the margins. I poured myself a glass of wine. I did not toast to anything. At 9 p.m., Tyler's first call came in. I let it ring. At 9:14 p.m. a voicemail. "Maya, please. I need to talk to you. I made a terrible mistake. Please just pick up." His voice was unsteady. He sounded like a man who had expected softness and found a locked door. At 9:47 p.m. a text. "I'm coming home tomorrow morning. Please just let me explain." I read it. I set my phone on the counter. And I thought about the word home, how casually he'd used it, how completely he'd misunderstood whose home this was, whose name was on the lease, whose credit score had secured it, whose sense of order kept it running. I replied at 10:02 p.m. One sentence. "Come at 10. Use the front door." Then I went to bed. I set my alarm for 7 a.m., which gave me 3 hours to shower, dress carefully, make coffee, and be completely, visibly, undeniably composed before Tyler Hargrove rang my doorbell. He needed to walk in expecting rubble. He needed to find architecture. At 10:09 a.m. on October 15th, 27 hours and 6 minutes after he had sent me 14 words and disappeared, my doorbell rang. I picked up the manila envelope from the kitchen counter. Renee had messengered it over at 8:30 a.m. Divorce petition. Legal separation notice. Formal co-signing liability reassignment request. Tabbed, organized, a pen already clipped to the front. I walked to the front door. Took one breath. I opened it. He looked terrible. I say that not with satisfaction or maybe a small amount of satisfaction, but mostly as a factual observation. Tyler Hargrove, who 27 hours earlier had stood at an altar in a charcoal suit looking like someone's best decision, was now standing on my front porch in yesterday's clothes with the particular hollowness of a man who had not slept, had not eaten well, and had spent most of the night being forced to reckon with his own choices. I was wearing a silk robe, deep green, and I had made a deliberate decision to wear it rather than change into something more formal. I wanted him to see someone comfortable in her own space. Someone who had slept. Someone for whom this morning was functionally a normal morning, because I had done my work the night before and there was nothing left to panic about. He said, "Maya." I said, "Tyler, come in. Coffee's on." He stepped inside like he wasn't sure the floor would hold him. He looked around the living room. His guitar was still in the corner. A jacket of his was still on the hook by the door, because I hadn't had time and honestly hadn't prioritized moving his belongings, and something crossed his face. Relief, maybe. The misread assumption that familiar surroundings meant a familiar outcome. I poured him coffee. I set it on the counter. I sat across from him on the stool I always use, and I let him talk. He talked for 11 minutes. I know because I was watching the clock on the microwave behind his head. He said he was sorry. He said Kayla had meant nothing. It was unfinished business, I just needed to close it. It was stupid, it was the worst decision of my life. He said he loved me. He said he had panicked. He said he knew he didn't deserve forgiveness, but he was asking for it anyway. He said, I want to fix this, Maya. Please. We just got married. This doesn't have to be the end. When he finished, the kitchen was quiet. I reached behind me to the counter and slid the manila envelope across to him. He looked at it. He looked at me. I said, Tyler, I need you to read what's in there. He opened it slowly. I watched his face move through the pages the way a weather system moves across a radar screen. Confusion first, then recognition, then a specific kind of pale that means the financial reality has landed. The divorce petition. Filed the previous afternoon. Case number and everything. The co-signing liability reassignment request, already submitted to the loan servicer, with a protective review notation attached, a formal notice that the lease on the Brookhaven property, his home, as he'd called it in last night's text, was held solely in my name and that I was exercising my right to request vacant possession within 30 days per the terms of our cohabitation agreement. Yes, we had a cohabitation agreement. I was a financial planner. Of course we had a cohabitation agreement. He set the papers down. He said, You did all of this last night. I said, I did all of this last night. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, Maya, I came here because I love you. Doesn't that mean anything? And I want to tell you what I felt in that moment because it surprised me. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated in the dramatic, cinematic way you might expect after all of this. What I felt was something quieter and more final than any of that. I felt free. I said, Tyler, what it means is that you should have thought about what you loved before you left. I spent last night being really clear about what I love, and what I love is my future. You made yourself incompatible with it. He tried once more. He said, Can we slow this down? Can we talk to someone? A counselor, whatever you want. Picked up my coffee. I said, The pen is clipped to the front page. The copy on the right is yours to keep. He signed it. Quietly, without another word. On page 4 where the tab marked respondent's signature waited for him with the patience of a document that had been correctly prepared. He left at 10:51 a.m. I stood at the kitchen window and watched his car pull out of the driveway. I stayed there for a while, maybe 4 minutes, maybe 5. Then I rinsed both coffee cups, placed them in the drying rack and opened my laptop. I had a 12:30 client meeting to prepare for. The consequences unfolded over the following weeks with the particular efficiency of things that have been properly documented. The loan servicer completed the liability reassignment in 38 business days. My name was removed from Tyler's business debt as of December 4th. The divorce was finalized in Georgia's standard 31-day uncontested period, with a financial settlement that returned $19,500 toward the wedding costs, structured as reimbursement for premarital asset deployment, which Renee argued cleanly and Tyler did not contest. He vacated the Brookhaven house by November 12th, 2 weeks ahead of the 30-day notice. I used the $19,500, combined with savings I'd rebuilt by spring, to make an offer on the Decatur property I had been watching before I redirected that money into a wedding. The offer was accepted in March. I moved in on a Saturday in April. My cousin Marcus helped me carry boxes. We ordered pizza. He didn't mention Tyler once, which was the kindest thing anyone did for me that entire year. People ask me sometimes, friends mostly, the ones who know the full story, whether I regret any of it. The wedding, the 4 years, the $22,000, the 14 months of building a life in a house with someone who was apparently still deciding whether he wanted it. You don't. And I want to explain why, because I think it matters more than the paperwork and the signed documents and the satisfying legal efficiency of how everything resolved. I don't regret it because I showed up completely. I loved Tyler without reservation, without performance, without the protective emotional distance that people who have been hurt before sometimes carry into new relationships like a shield they never fully put down. I gave that relationship everything I had, and I did it with my eyes open. And when it ended, I was able to look at myself in the mirror and say, you were not the problem here. That clarity is not nothing. That clarity, honestly, is everything. The Decatur house has hardwood floors and a kitchen with east-facing windows that fill with light by 7 a.m. I drink my coffee there every morning before my first call. I have a small garden in the back that I am, by my own admission, only moderately competent at maintaining. There is no one else's jacket on the hook by my front door. It is, without question, the most peaceful space I have ever lived in. I am not bitter. I am not still angry. I am not sitting in this story waiting for Tyler to fail so I can feel vindicated, because my life has stopped requiring his failure as a reference point. That, I think, is what resolution actually looks like. Not the dramatic moment at the door. Not the signed papers. Not even the financial settlement, satisfying as it was. Resolution is the morning you wake up and realize you haven't thought about it yet. And then you make your coffee, and you watch the light come through east-facing windows, and you think, I built this. This one is entirely mine. If you've ever been made to feel like the backup plan in your own life, by a partner, by a family member, by someone who was supposed to choose you and kept choosing everything else, I want you to hear this. The most powerful thing you can do is refuse to collapse on their timeline. Do your thinking. Do your documentation. Know your paperwork. And when they come back expecting rubble, and they will come back, make sure what they find is architecture. That was never the truth about you. The underestimating was always about them. If this story stayed with you, if any part of it felt familiar or gave you something you needed today, I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop your city in the comments. It genuinely means something to know who's in this room with me. And if there's someone in your life who needs to hear this story today, someone who is still in the middle of their quiet, still doing their thinking, still building their folder, share this with them. Sometimes the most useful thing we can do for the people we love is hand them proof that it gets better on the other side. If you haven't subscribed yet, this is a good moment. New stories go up every week. Real, specific, and always told from the other side of the hard part. I'll see you in the next one.